What were some of the most surprising discoveries that you came across while researching their history?
It turns out that it's a lot more manually curated. The people who worked there were handpicking who would become famous.
How do you think that this all impacts creators and their ability to build community on these social/entertainment platforms?
It's actually been really difficult because now that it's an interest-based feed, all of those relationships that creators have built up over the course of years, that doesn't really mean anything anymore, which is very sad.
Welcome to More to Say. I'm Amber Vinsbox, founder of the $2 billion creator commerce platform, LTK. I've spent the last 14 years pioneering the creator economy, and on this podcast, I'm giving you direct access to the knowledge and perspectives of some of today's most influential people. I want you to stay ahead of the curve, so pull up a seat because we are just getting started. I first learned about Sarah when she released her book, No Filter, back in 2020. Sarah conducted hundreds of interviews with the founders of Instagram, as well as employees, executives, competitors, and a plethora of influencers worldwide that provided the real inside scoop on the history of Instagram. And she herself was clearly a savant and an expert with a hugely valuable point of view. So last year I met Sarah in San Francisco in her capacity at Bloomberg, and she was one of the most knowledgeable editors I've met. We had a wonderful conversation about the dynamics in the tech, social, and entertainment industries, and honestly, I could have sat talking with her for hours. I wanted Sarah to be the first guest on my podcast because of her insights into social media platforms. She's really as close as you can get without being actually conflicted. These platforms are driving so much of our collective cultural global conversations today. Whether you're a user, run a business who uses these platforms to connect, or are thinking through how your children access and use these platforms. She's informed, she is interested, she is intellectually honest, and I only wish we could have spoken for longer. This episode's called The Power of Community, and we talk about the evolution of community on social platforms, the global move from follower-based feeds to interest-based feeds, what that means for creators and brands, and just how much of your audience you can actually access. We also talk about the almighty algorithm, how to strike gold and appeal to those algorithms, and just how heavy-handed the platforms really are in choosing winners and losers. We talk about the challenge of constantly having to reinvent yourself. And finally, a huge discussion on just who will actually own the future of the internet. In my conversation with Sarah, we also talk about TikTok and what it would mean for the creator economy if the platform goes away. Since our conversation, we now know that TikTok is suing the US government, so it remains unknown what will happen for sure. Regardless, every platform is now a TikTok clone, so the bigger conversation really becomes about how to navigate and future-proof your business to retain, nurture, and grow your community as a business. Sarah, welcome to More to Say. You've been with Bloomberg for nearly 13 years, and that's actually where I first got to meet you. And you oversee an entire team of tech reporters there, and I really truly believe that they are some of the most talented and informed that I have come across. Can you share a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Well, I think that journalism is really just my favorite way to learn. I like talking to people and understanding their perspectives and what their challenges are, and then explaining it to somebody. I started that way in college and even before, trying to figure out, what is it that I don't know and that I want to learn. I was never really much of a textbook person. I like people. I like understanding their challenges and writing.
Well, it makes total sense that you wrote the book No Filter. And actually, that's how I first came across you. That book is the inside story on Instagram. And I'm so curious, what specifically led you to writing one of the first ever books to cover a social media platform?
Well, I can't resist, an untold story. And I thought at the time, around 2018, when I started on the book, Instagram had this impact on our world that was really visible. Like you could see it in the way that people dressed, in the way that coffee shops were designed, in the decisions people made about their vacations. Like so much of it was so tangible, and yet the story of Instagram was completely untold. Like people knew that it had been acquired by Facebook. People knew that it was a popular photo sharing app. Maybe they had heard of the founders, probably not. And so I felt like there was just a lot to uncover. And I went into the book thinking, well, is this like Facebook 2.0? Is this like, the big future of social media? And what I found was so much more interesting, so much more drama involved in the history of Instagram than even I imagined. And that made for a great book.
I remember when I first came across Instagram, and it was actually through our creators who were using it as a photo editing tool. And then it auto published to Facebook, I think, at the time. And so I was like, what is this tool like? How do their pictures look so good? Because this was a time when really the App Store had just come loaded on the iPhone. I was actually in transition from a BlackBerry at the time to the iPhone. So it was all kind of like
And the
hitting
iPhone
at
took terrible
once.
photos.
Really bad photos. So I look back at those original. I think my first Instagram photo was actually a picture of beer because I was on a date with Baxter at like a brewery, and he was like, "Let's download this app together." And so we just like kind of took pictures of each other. What was your first picture?
I think it was a banana cream pudding or something, like a bread pudding, which is like so not Instagrammable. But at the time, everything was like worth putting on Instagram, because it was just so novel. People were taking pictures of like cracks in the street and sunsets and all sorts of things that just seemed new when they were put on the internet.
No, they were. And then, okay, so you did so much research for this book. I'm so curious. Like, can you tell us about that research and then how you got access to all the people that you did?
So I interviewed hundreds of people. What was important to me, I'm a tech journalist, and so I know that world pretty well. I wanted to make sure that I talked to people who are current and former employees. I wanted to talk to people who were competitors, people who had really built this, and people who had been at Facebook when this new app came and joined them. But for this book in particular, I thought it was important to have a more holistic source base. So I wanted to talk also to creators, to celebrities, to advertisers, to those who, even people who are like running restaurants, teens, parents. I wanted to talk to a wider swath to understand, what really happened here to society, to the way that we choose what we buy, to the way that we interact with each other. I kind of went very broad, and then I told this story of not only the inside drama of the app and the decisions they made about the product and the acquisition and the tensions with Facebook, but also about that impact on society, how Instagram became the place where celebrities were minted, and where, the influencer really came to be a force in our society. So and also to change a lot of the ways that we value ourselves, the self-worth that we seek through followers and likes, and I know we're going to get to that later.
Well, I can't imagine how exciting it was on a day-to-day basis with just the raw information that you were gathering. I'm sure if it were me, I'd be picking up a phone and like, who can I tell? Like, you're not going to believe what I just heard. What were some of the most surprising discoveries that you came across while researching their history?
I mean, the craziest thing about reporting a book is you are the only person who knows everything that you know, and it's a lot of pressure. It's like, oh my gosh, did I hear that right? Do I understand this correctly? Am I triangulating this information correctly? So there is a challenge. There are two things that I thought were just like bombshell fascinations. Number one, I think we often think of Instagram as like this meritocracy where the best content rises to the surface, and people make a name for themselves by being super creative or original. It turns out that it's a lot more manually curated than that. And throughout the history of the app, the people who worked there were handpicking who would become famous. They were essentially kingmakers. They were also tweaking the algorithm, changing the rules in ways that they thought would benefit the user experience, changing what kinds of content would get promoted and not promoted. And that to me, I felt was so different than what everyone assumed in putting content on the internet. And, by the way, that it went both ways. They minted stars from the ground up, and they also turned celebrities into influencers, like people who were A-listers who had never really cared about the internet, went through a publicist for their entire lives, or once they became famous at least, were now looking to Instagram to say like, hey, how do I do this? And Instagram had a lot of hands-on white glove assistance for those people to help them come up with creative ways to post on the app that would then be successful and promoted by Instagram. So a lot of it is chosen and manufactured by them. That's number one. The other is more of an internal story. You would assume that Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, when he had this sort of fast growing app in his midst, that he would just kind of let it do its thing and contribute to Facebook in the way that the founders envisioned. In fact, what I found through my reporting is that Zuckerberg got very jealous and then tried to take control of Instagram in the end, leading to, I don't want to give away too much, but leading to a lot of tension with the Instagram founders and a lot of changes to the app and how we use it today.
The thing about manual curation that you discovered is something that we now know about TikTok, for example. That behind the curtain, there's actually tons of people who are manually tweaking the algorithm, which I found to be so interesting because, of course, there is, a technical significance to what they've built, but there's also a huge human power database. The thing about picking winners is that you're also picking losers. Did you find anything around how they thought about competition or people that they didn't want to be highly visible?
Well, I think that when I was speaking with those employees who worked on sort of the community team, they wanted to build a healthy app. And so they were promoting what they thought would benefit the community and de-emphasizing stuff that they thought would not. Like they weren't going to put any really sexy pictures on the @Instagram page because there was enough of that on Instagram. But what that went counter to was the actual algorithmic strength of the recommendations that people are just going to still find the content that they want to find, because when you send that signal to Instagram, like I'm clicking on this, I'm hovering even on this image longer, I'm sharing this with my friend, you're sending a signal that is high quality content. Even if that's not truly high quality content, the algorithm digests it that way. And so they were kind of their own worst enemy, the human curation versus the algorithmic outcome that then, put Instagram into all this hot water that we've seen happen over the last couple of years in terms of body image issues and even drug sales on the app, all sorts of things that have become part of Instagram, the ugly side that the company kind of didn't really want to acknowledge or talk about.
Mm-hmm. Did you find anything about the app actually listening to you, like Audible, to inform the algorithm?
That's the best conspiracy theory. I think I think that it's our online footprint is so carefully monitored by so many different data sources at once that things that seem like a coincidence, like I just mentioned this and then now it's on my feed, it could be who you're sharing a Wi-Fi connection with, what they search for. It could be purely coincidental, something that was in a text message that you sent. Not that they can read your text messages, but they can certainly read your DMs. I think that's, from what I've tried. I haven't found evidence of that yet, but if you find, please let me know.
Okay, so in your book, you really explore what Instagram faced when joining Facebook at the time, now Meta. And specifically, you talk about the difference between a community-driven model versus a company-driven model. Can you explain that to our listeners?
Well, the very simple thing to do when you're building a business is to think about what is going to cause growth for us. And looking at the data and saying, okay, this is what people are clicking on. This is what they want more of. And I think that is actually Facebook/Meta's biggest weakness, is that they think that the data is telling them the right story. When you talk to users and you talk to the influencers, you talk to the creators, the everyday people who are using the app, they have a different opinion about what is quality content and what they wish they were doing on the app. So those forces are at odds, and Instagram was definitely more about focus grouping, talking to creators, trying to build the app that they wanted to use. And Facebook was so data driven. Like it was very difficult to get anything done at Facebook unless you could prove that action was going to cause the app to grow. And a lot of times actions you take for the health of the app do not cause the app to grow. Like consider, getting rid of content that is harmful. That is getting rid of content, right? You have to have fewer posts, and fewer posts mean fewer slot for ads, and fewer things for people to look at. So I think that there's always this push pull, but when it came to Instagram versus Facebook, the tensions were really stark.
Did you see any, or I guess maybe the better question is, at what point did you notice that the experience was shifting from a community-driven model to more of an algorithmic personalized feed model?
Well, at some point, culture changes, right? So, like, partly they had to shift to Instagram used to be, just to give you a quick history lesson, it used to be that everything was reverse chronological. Whatever people posted, you would find at the top of your feed the latest post. That worked for a while. And then people who are professional creators got really smart about saying, okay, I'm going to post I'm looking at the analytics. I'm going to post when people are waking up in the morning, and make sure that it's at everyone's feeds when they check it first thing. And that kind of content was drowning out content from friends and family. And Instagram found that if you aren't seeing your friends and family posts, like people who you have close ties to, you're not going to feel like you're good enough for Instagram. Like if everyone that you're seeing is a professional, the beautiful, curated, face-tuned images of everyone that does not look like your life on the couch, you're just not going to engage and create content. So they needed to do the algorithm. And the secret at the time in 2016 when they started it was that the algorithm was tuned to show people whatever content would encourage them to post more. So it was kind of an interesting data-based reason. And around the same time, they introduced Instagram stories, which was supposed to also lower the bar for what kind of content was Instagrammable. Because at a certain point, the high quality of what people were posting on Instagram was bad for growth.
I think we're seeing that today. I've seen reports on social media platforms that actually there's not a high volume of content from like the layman, for example, that it is an intimidating environment, that the professional content has actually really overtaken. Do you think that they've just kind of stepped away from that need to have people in your life there? Because when I open my Explore page, for example, it's all highly professional content. And candidly, I've been a creator for 14 years. I find it intimidating. I'm like, I don't have time or resources or a team to create that for me personally. And so I find myself less, posting in feed.
I think they've given up on it, honestly, on having public content created by everyday people. I think people are going to post about their weddings, about their new babies, things that are like really momentous in their lives. Just like when we started to see Facebook change, I would say around like 2015 or so, and it became a place where people weren't posting like, their vacations as much. They were just posting like when they got a new job, the really high bar. I think that's where Instagram is now. And like for everything that there doesn't absolutely have to be a social record of, they're sharing it privately in Instagram stories. Well, I guess it's semi-private if it goes away, or in close friend stories. And then those ways of sharing are leading people to have private conversations and direct messages. There's sort of this problem that social media platforms run into at a certain point. When you have too many followers and people that you are following, it's like, instead of sharing with an intimate group of close ties, you are shouting it to the world. And the bar for what the world cares about just gets a little higher. So I think that's one reason why you've seen Instagram and other platforms shift to an interest-based feed. Not just because they want to, not because they want to kill the friends and family content and bury it. It's because there isn't enough friends and family content to fill your feed and keep you scrolling. You just run out of things to look at if it was only people that you personally cared about.
You could see this too.
They have to do the interest-based feed.
On the app right now, you can actually go to there's a way to flip to chronological feed. And what's so interesting is there's like nothing there. Like you can get to the end of it and people haven't posted for a while. It's honestly very telling. How do you think this has affected the overall user experience and interaction?
I think it's become something that is much more of a, I'm just going to use this for a few minutes while I'm waiting at the bus stop, while I'm waiting for my takeout order to be ready. Like all of those little moments where you're just like wasting time, honestly. That's when you're going to be on Instagram. There's not that social pull that we used to have where like I have to go see what people are doing with their day. It's just not happening anymore. Unless you're looking at, I think you still get that in Instagram stories in the ephemeral content.
How do you think that this all impacts creators and their ability to build community on these social/entertainment platforms?
It's actually been really difficult because now that it's an interest-based feed, all of those relationships that creators have built up over the course of years, whatever the follower count says, that doesn't really mean anything anymore, which is very sad. If you have, 100,000 followers, 5,000 followers, those people that you think are seeing every post that you make, they're not because of the interest-based feed. And so what has happened is those relationships that creators thought they owned, they simply don't. And now in order to get in front of people, you have to basically strike gold in terms of your content alignment with what the algorithm wants every single time. And that is making for a much more challenging environment. I would say it's much easier to be a new creator than it ever was, and much more difficult to be an established creator who felt that they had a group of people that were, hanging on their every word, but they simply aren't reaching those people anymore.
Is there a stat that creators or brands or anyone else should be looking at today?
Yeah, followers doesn't really mean anything anymore. I think that what they need to look at is how much of your audience do you own? How much of the, attention that you get is people who you can reach again another time? Do you have their email addresses? Do you know anything about them? I think that ability to reach the people that have some trust in your content and some familiarity with who you are, that's the moneymaker, right? People are going to, the reason that influencers are so powerful, creators are so powerful, is because they build this rapport with their audience that makes them more trustworthy than even, a major brand in some cases. Like, I might trust you more when I'm trying to design a nursery for a baby than I would trust, like, Crate and Barrel to tell me what to buy, because they have, I see them as having like an incentive to sell me whatever they want to sell me, whereas you are actually like doing it for yourself. So that's the power of creators, but it's not as easy to turn that into money as it was.
Okay, guys, taking a quick break because I want to tell you each week about something that I absolutely love and am using in my own life. So I'm actually really passionate about the stuff that I'm using on my eyes right now. So I'm going to take about 1 minute to walk you through this. I actually got Grande Lash. I grew up like using Latisse. No problem with Latisse, but Grande Lash is working really, really well for me. So this is a lash grower. I was using lash extensions. You guys knew about that. And it was breaking my lashes off. And so for the last year, I've actually not been using those. And then for the last, 2 to 3 months been using Grande Lash. My lashes are actually, they're ridiculously long. Like I know that we're on radio here and so you can't really totally see them, but I am a huge fan. This stuff absolutely works. The next is called Lumify. So this was actually, one of my colleagues told me about this product, and it's a tiny little bottle. It's like 0.17 ounces. And you actually just do a drop in each eye. And it makes the whites of your eyes very white, which I love to do before I like go on stage or go to an event. It just kind of like cleans you up and makes you look very healthy. I think, sometimes you can tell how healthy someone is by just like the coloring on their eyes. Like, have they slept? Are they eating well? Have they been drinking too much? The whites of your eyes just make you look like you're like showing up ready to go. The next thing I'm obsessed with, and I keep this stocked, is my Tarte tubing mascara. So this stuff just layers and layers and layers and goes on for days. I have actually just like 2 layers on right now. This is only my natural lashes. I don't have any sort of stick-ons or extensions or anything. I'm obsessed with this because it doesn't drip on my face. It doesn't smudge on my face. If I forget and don't take it off at night, I wake up the next morning, it's not everywhere. This is my favorite thing. Order 2 at a time. And then last, this is my newest. So this is Anastasia. It's a brow freeze gel. I got this from an LTK creator, and it just like, you know how people like to laminate their eyebrows? I had done the lamination and it just didn't really hold for me. And so this, I love the gel. It actually truly like freezes them in place, and they have a laminated look. And it's all just in a bottle. You don't have to take all that time to do the lamination process. So these 4 products, I'll make sure in the notes for you guys, but these are my absolute go-to, like fully, wholly endorse these. And I hope that your eyes look wonderful with them. Everything that I'm using and wearing and talking about each week, including my favorite things on the More to Say podcast, are all on my LTK. At Amber Vin's box on the LTK app, there's a podcast section, and absolutely everything that we're covering, anything that you can buy that I'm talking about will be there. So be sure to go check that out. It's interesting in conversations I'm often asked, like, what happens if like TikTok goes away and, you know, the creators aren't making any money? And I have to remind people, the platforms were never paying them the money. You always had to have an actual, like a business backbone set up already in order to scoop people and then figure out how to monetize them in another way through another platform. And what we've seen over these years was, of course, the Instagram acquisition, but then you've seen the rise of Pinterest, and then, of course, Snap, and then now TikTok. And what we've been teaching our creators over time is we're going to expect that a new one is coming along every 2 years, which gives you an increased opportunity for audience, a new audience. But then, like, where are you bringing them home to? And so we've really built out LTK to be what I call like the boat. It's like you're a fisherman. You're out there on all of these platforms, hopefully hitting it right on the algorithm. But then you got to bring people home to continue to nurture that relationship, to build trust. They have to find you. And you talked about being able to access them. We launched a feature that's called it's subscribe to post. It's a bell. And you can click the bell. And I talked to our creators about this is audience on demand. This is when you post, they're going to find out about it and not miss it. And that's one of the most critical things I think facing creators today is exactly what you said. How do you access the people who've expressed interest in what you have to share? If you were giving advice to somebody looking to navigate social media today or just launching as a creator today, I know those are 2 different things. What would you recommend?
I mean, I would say that more isn't always better. I think that what we see even in media, that like people who try to go mass market and do something advertising based, it doesn't have as much longevity as when people build something that people really need. If you're creating content, it has to be something that people actually need, that they will refer to solve a problem in their lives, or even if they need a laugh to be entertained. There are a lot of different ways people need content, but if they don't need it, I mean, they're not going to give money to you. So trying to do what everyone else is doing is sort of a short-term gain solution that is going to shift whenever the algorithm shifts or whenever a new platform comes up. And I would say even if you are trying to give people what they want and what they need in your own unique way, you're still going to have to reinvent yourself all the time. That's just the nature of the business. People are going to want different kinds of content. We don't want the sort of face-tuned, bikini-clad influencer on the beach kind of content like the way we did in 2017, right? Like it's just not interesting or novel anymore. The internet becomes, things that work on the internet become cliche really fast. And then you need to come up with something new.
Almost immediately. I feel like even in the course of this week, I've seen the ASMR try-ons, and then I've seen like 10 people do an ASMR try-on. And it's like, how did this become stale in five days? It is pretty crazy. The creator industry to me started back in the blogging days, but to other people, it started back in like the MySpace days, like the original. And MySpace is no longer around. Twitter as it was, you could argue that is not around in the way that it was. Facebook, of course, has gone through a complete evolution of creators used to have, their pages on Facebook. Then they turned off those pages. Remember when they turned off kind of like media sites and not turned them off. You had to actually search to get to them. They would not show up in feed anymore. Now we've gone through other cycles. They're back to really like focusing on groups. So I would call that like an evolution. We've been through, a lot and a lot of different platforms. And what I've noticed for our creators is that It's really technology changes consumer preferences. And so MySpace was the best thing that was available back then. And then you can think of like, what is the next best thing that's been available? I think they're always going to gravitate what is like the easiest and the most rewarding to them. Like you said, like what is like something that they need that's like actually providing value. But for, anyone in media, I always advise them. I started a blog back in 2010. I can wish with all my heart that people love to go to my blog. It doesn't matter how many posts I do a day on that or how much I spend to redesign it. If consumers don't want to type in a URL and go to a web address on their phone, it's not going to happen. And so I think what you're saying is absolutely right. You have to look and see like what is available, what is the consumer behavior, and then meet them there in a way that provides real value. And that's something that I know a lot of us have a hard time with because we've invested so much. They call it like the IKEA effect. If you help to build it, then
the distribution is broken. Platforms don't want links out of the platforms. It's against their interests. They want to keep you there as much as possible. So I think that what that means is people have to understand, how do I build a direct relationship? Otherwise, all of these platforms are just digital landlords and you don't own the house. They own the property. They can change the rules on you. They can evict you. I get so many messages from people who say, hey, my Instagram account is now locked. I can't access it. Can you help me? And it's so crazy to me that still the best way to solve that problem is to like find an employee at Meta and beg them, right? Which is insane. There is no customer service for people who are literally building their livelihoods in these environments. They're trying to get better at that, but I do think that the way that they're going to try to get better at that is through AI. It's still not going to be a human, so you're not going to be able to like explain the nuances of a situation to get yourself out of trouble. I think that it's just worth being cognizant of, when people say like, oh, I want to be an influencer because it seems like such a chill career. It is not a chill career. I know you know this more than anyone, but you have to constantly think like, okay, what do people want right now? Do they want a podcast? Do they want a newsletter? Do they want, a curated Amazon store? What is it that people will actually use? And is it something that, no one's thought of yet? And sort of build that from your own instincts.
So you've talked a lot about the challenges of the creator side. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing these social media / kind of entertainment platforms today?
Well, I think that we have to wait and see, but it's possible that shifting to this interest-based model is sort of a short-term solution that might eventually shoot themselves in the foot. Because if you don't have, like I said, around the logic for introducing Instagram's algorithm and Instagram stories, like if you don't have friends and family posting, what's your reason for going there? And entertainment can get very stale very fast. The other thing that I see happening is, with the advent of AI, a lot more of the content is going to become synthetic. We're going to have creators turning themselves into a bot to speak with their fans and customers, and I think that will be really interesting. But it will also cheapen the experience. And so I think we were talking about this the other day, like the human relationship is going to become a lot more of a luxury. It might be something that people will even pay for, to have like an actual human conversation. But then on the platforms, we're going to have a lot more skepticism about what we see, a lot more difficulty building trust. It's going to be a really interesting period.
I spent a lot of time last summer talking to our creators about what AI meant for them. And some of the conversations we had is, look at your own content. What are you doing today that AI could do? And you should expect for that to be something that you should no longer do. So for example, our creators that have created a ton of like collages, they can be very useful. But an AI can create collages, and guess what? They can create it for actually every single retailer. So then you go to a retailer site and there's collages created underneath everything. And so what's the differentiating factor between someone coming to your LTK, for example, if it's just a bunch of collages, and going to a retail site with just a bunch of collages? And so we talked a lot about how do you differentiate yourself, and the thematically, it was being human is your superpower. So think about how you lean into that. There was a recent article that talked about a man who created an AI female on Instagram. Actually, he got, I think, close to 40,000 followers, and ultimately was lamenting that he couldn't monetize it. And the reason being, he didn't know how to communicate with the followers and actually like build community. And that was something that I just think is so worthy of highlighting as we think about AI. It's like with creators, the reason this industry works is because you have trust. People know you, they can depend on you. You're showing up for them, you're responding to them. For me, I love cheering people on. They're like, oh, I got that thing, or I used your coupon, or I wore it here. Like those are actually, that's like what drives me as a creator. I love to have those interactions. And so I do think that being human will be a superpower, and something that our clients and the media alike should really lean into.
Well, but also, if it can save you time to have the AI make your collages for you, like there are some productivity things that could happen here. Um, it just is a matter of how you implement it.
Right. I'll spare you what all is going on at LTK, or maybe we'll do that as a, like kind of an insert on the AI, just efficiency side of things, which is how we think about it. Okay, switching to TikTok. So this week, the president signed into law that there would be a divestiture or ban of TikTok in the next 9 to 12 months. So I'm so curious. Do you think someone will buy what I'm going to call the shell of TikTok, which would be TikTok without the algorithm?
I don't know why you would buy TikTok without the algorithm. And the algorithm is the secret sauce. I also don't think that ByteDance would sell it. They probably are going to have, some conversations to just see what that could look like. But that this countdown, there's going to be a legal challenge. It's going to take a while. We're not going to see anything sort of resolve here until much later than the 270 days. And I think in the meantime, what we're going to see happen is just a lot of people in limbo, right? Creators in limbo, employees in limbo. It might be harder for TikTok to recruit good talent. It might be harder for people to, decide to pick that as like their place to launch their careers. I think that just the uncertainty around the app's future might make it more difficult for the app to be as powerful, which is, interesting because they're already becoming a little less powerful in the United States because of the success of moves from Instagram Reels and from YouTube Shorts, and from Snapchat short video version as well. I think that there's just more options now, and I think that if you are someone who relies on TikTok, there might be more incentive to try the others.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting. I just learned today that actually part of that bill included any other companies. So, for example, like a Lemonade or a CapCut. And I actually didn't even
Yeah.
realize that it wasn't just specifically TikTok that was named, which is interesting. Do you see this happening anywhere else globally? Has there been conversation about that in other Western countries?
I mean, I think that this is a big threat in general to the social platforms, because if the US bans TikTok, what's to stop India from banning Instagram? It just could get to a point where it sets this precedent, that just like what we're seeing with the way that DC has become very like, oh, if you're going to prosecute Trump, then we're going to prosecute Biden. It's just like a lot of like, if your country is going to ban TikTok, then we're going to ban your platforms. And there's going to be this tension around the world of like, who do we let determine the future of the internet? Is it going to be U.S. based companies? Is it going to be China based companies? Is there a world where they both exist? And for these companies, like, you can't really cut off part of your app or make part of your app different or have a different version of it in one country. I mean, you certainly could, but it would be such a gigantic engineering challenge to untangle everything. You'd basically have to rebuild it. And you would also lose the power of the network, which is what makes these apps so enticing, is that like you can interact with anyone from around the world. So I think it's definitely this kind of a slippery slope. But I know people who are very in favor because they're concerned about China having access to U.S. user data.
I can think around the birth pains of this. last time in China, of course, as anyone in China, you're not using any Meta products, you're not using any Apple products. They've recently banned, of course, Telegram and a series of other apps just in
Right.
the last, week. So, okay. In the US, we've really created the tech giants of the world in so many ways. You think about the alphabets that own, Google and YouTube, and then, of course, Meta and Amazon. It's interesting to see that actually a lot of the regulation around privacy comes from Europe. And I remember, when for the creator industry, it was really shaken in 2017 when Mark went to testify in front of Congress. And that was actually a kind of a ripple effect from GDPR, which was kind of a series of privacy events that happened in Europe that then the US tends to follow those same kind of privacy regulations within a few years. And so when he went to testify, they turned up a number of APIs that also included actually an API that we used to use to deliver the Like to Know It newsletter, as it was called at that time. So overnight, everyone needed to flip into the app and use the screenshot instead of the like button. But it is very interesting how these global dynamics really will influence who we can speak to and connect with, I think, even over the coming decades.
At the same time, it's like this TikTok legislation is maybe one of the first pieces of significant federal action versus social media after all of those congressional hearings, after all that's been said and done in DC. Every senator that sent a letter to Zuckerberg ever. This is it so far. Really, like nothing has really come from the U.S. to hurt Meta except for perception, and their stock is doing great.
This spring has felt like Christmas at LTK because our team are just launching so many products for our clients. One of my favorite ones that just launched is the subscribe button. So if you go to my LTK at Amber Vin's box, you can click the bell at the top of the screen and actually subscribe. And what that means is that you'll get a post notification, like a push, for every single time that I post. And then you'll also, when you log into the app, have me in your notification section. So you'll be able to see all of my posts and that they're there and they're waiting for you. I know you guys don't always get to see me on every social platform, whether it's the algorithm or if you're not even, checking it out that day. So it's a great way to keep in touch with me. And just for all the creators that you love, I have a ton that I have subscribed to, and it makes it so easy to go find my favorite people every day and not miss any of their content. I'm seeing these platforms start to pay bonuses. Just this week, I've got notifications as a creator of like, hey, the more reels you create, the more money you're going to make. I'm sure there's other platforms doing that as well, seizing the moment to try and win the traffic. But shifting to you kind of just as a leader of others and a journalist, as you think of yourself in that sort of mentorship role, either among your editors or other people that look to you for advice, what do you find yourself most often teaching others?
I think the most important thing right now is to follow, if you're a journalist, to follow your own curiosity. The like we said earlier, the content that's going to rise to the surface is that which is unique and new, and like nobody can really replicate deep reporting, finding out the answer. Analysis is a dime a dozen. Everyone can do an analysis. I could make a TikTok video right now and analyze somebody's news story. To go out and do that reporting and find, wrongdoing by a company, an interesting trend that nobody's noticed, that is really going to have the impact and really build that relationship with people who will then trust you and trust your reporting. So I think that that's a really important takeaway right now. And also just getting to a place where what you do results in respect from sources, and getting people to call you because they realize that you're serious about trying to hold these companies accountable. I think as a manager, too, it's really important to understand that like every person who is doing this job is doing it maybe slightly differently than I would. We all have different strengths, and so I think that it's not so much about like teaching people the way that I would do it, but like getting them to lean on their own strengths in the way that they would do it, and having them succeed in that way and learning from them. I learned so much from everyone on my team.
That makes me think back to Billie Jean King. So, of course, tennis core is trending, not to transition to fashion, but Billie Jean King talked a lot about, I can't remember if it was her backhand or her forehand, but one of them was good and one of them was bad. And when she was asked, like, where do you spend your time? She was like, I perfect the one that I am like very best at, because if that is my secret weapon, I want to be like the very best at that thing. And no matter how much work I do on the other one, I'm still not going to get it there. And so that just reminds me of what you're saying about like really leaning into your strengths. At LTK, we often ask people to identify their superpowers and then really lean in with that. And I too have to remember that I have certain superpowers and I have a whole lot of weaknesses. And so even finding and building your teams and the people around you to have complementary superpowers is so important.
And to get better every day. I mean, try to improve your strategy and yourself, and be challenged, I think, is really important.
So for you personally, what have you been learning lately?
This is something that I was, because I knew you were going to ask me this, and I was just thinking about it this morning. I mean, I learn so much all the time from everything that I do. One thing I was thinking about this morning is I was like walking around in the neighborhood, and I was noticing the teen fashion of basically what I was wearing as a teen, which is pretty funny. And I was thinking about like that 2003, 2005, like that era of life, and why that has kind of come back in vogue. And this is just my theory and just like my sort of walking in the neighborhood thought. But like maybe it's because that's the last time we really had a shared culture as a society where we would all like listen to the same songs on the radio or watch the same TV shows. And so much has changed since then that has created this this splintering of not just our culture but our reality. And so one thing that I think, like, as people who are writing for the public or creating content for the public, like one thing to keep in mind is just like everyone has a different context for what you're putting out there. It makes it a lot more difficult to create some consensus in society, to determine what the truth is, and meet people where they are, because, even in the same household, on the same couch, like I may have different celebrities than my husband does in my mind, right? Based on what content I'm listening to or watching. So I think that's just, I don't know if it's something I'm learning, but I think it's something that I'm thinking about, is like, how do we get to a place where like we can speak the language or reach the people that that need the information we're providing, but like maybe have a different path to get there.
I think about that in our industry. For a creator, I often challenge them to identify like what are the unique attributes that you have that give you that unique perspective. And sometimes it's that maybe you're a cancer survivor, or maybe it's that you're a runner, or that you're petite, or you live in a really specific environment that people are looking to. And then how do you build community around that thing and make that your expertise and sort of what you're known for, to really draw people in who care and want to know about that thing. And then that's all a reflection that we are, what you described as like that nation of niche with all these different perspectives. I think as a marketer, it's very challenging. It also means that it's so important that you find the people. And I first saw this actually during the pandemic, because we had parts of the country that masks were required. You had parts of the country where masks were taboo, parts of the country that were still socializing and wearing dresses, parts of the country that were in, sweats lock in their homes. And so as a retailer, it's like, how do you market to this? And so that was, I think, one of the first times that we saw creator marketing really do the hard work, because if you were in, targeting someone who is in a Boston or a Dallas, wherever, you find those local people who can like bring that context to that piece of content and hopefully reach their local community who identifies with and who can understand the context for that product. And I think that's, creators are definitely helping brands to solve that problem. Really interesting insight though, around, I think, just like the fashion and what it means people are thinking about and yearning for. For you, what would you say that, this is a two-part question, I guess, is either keeping you up at night because you're thinking so much about it, or that you're just feeling really passionate about right now that you're sharing with others, or that's just on your mind?
I've been I've been thinking about how AI is going to change healthcare. It's sort of outside my expertise as a journalist. I've been covering big tech for a while, but I, you know, having had some recent interaction with healthcare providers, I just like have really been looking into that and fascinated with like, how is this going to change diagnosis? How is this going to change the way people interact with their doctors, the way certain procedures get done? Like, I just, it's something a rabbit hole I've been diving into.
I can get really excited about that. I feel like there's a huge opportunity to upgrade care. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for being here today. I've had so much respect for you for so long. And the more time I spend with you, the more I'm excited about all the things you're sharing and your perspectives. And it's truly an honor to get to share this kind of dinner table conversation with our listeners. And we're grateful for all of your generosity of information. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
All right, Amber, I'm excited to dive into some hot takes with you. First off, I'm Stephanie Machado. I'm a manager on our creator success team at LTK, and I lead our efforts in really understanding what's going on in the industry. So to start us off, Instagram has come out with more transparent terms than ever. They have come out and said that duplicate content across platforms will impact your performance and reach. We're unsure of what this means, but it sounds like something equivalent to a shadow ban. They've also acknowledged something that creators have known for quite some time, and that's that followers are not as important anymore, apparently at all. And this is coming directly from the source. So I'd love to know, what is your POV on all of this?
So two different topics. One is having that content and having it across platforms. Certainly every platform wants to have the best and the most exclusive content. That's why they're saying that. Unless you have a watermark on your piece of content, no one is going to know what platform that came from. There is no way for example, for YouTube to dedupe against Instagram, to know what you've already published to TikTok. So as a creator, you should actually be using all of these platforms as marketing channels for your community, and using that as a way to get them back to your home base. And I'm going to talk more about the home base in a minute. But today, almost every platform is operating like a TikTok, where it is an interest-based feed, which means that you never know which platform is going to think that your content is interesting for your followers. So this is a moment where they all want your short form video content. You can put it across multiple places. So I would highly encourage you to distribute it across all of these platforms. The second piece that Adam came out with was talking about followers. So this is something I've been really passionate about for a while now. Actually, summer of 2022, I started speaking with our creators about what I was seeing in the market. And I started seeing the labor pains of followers not mattering and then community going away. And what I started to see was I opened up Instagram and it no longer loaded me to my homepage. It loaded me to an explore page. And that, of course, is content that I'm being fed from the platform. I also noticed things like I would type in a creator's name and want to go to their profile, but it would actually just show me photo results of that creator instead of showing me that I could go to their account or like driving me to their profile. These were changes in the way the platform is engineered and what they want me to do there. And what they were encouraging me to do was sit back, relax, and let us serve you content instead of saying, hey, these are the communities that you've opted in to be a part of. So as a founder, I do believe my job is to be a futurist. It's to look at these trends, predict what's going to happen in the future, and then invest for that day. And immediately we started investing in creator tools that allowed them to retain their community, to attract them to the LTK as their home base, to nurture them, and then ultimately to grow that community. We saw that really over the last 2 years, the job that these platforms do for creators has changed entirely. I got on Instagram 2013 as a way to find my community, to speak with them, to reach them every day. If fast forward to today, Instagram maybe goes by the same name. It does not. It is engineered entirely differently. And actually, it's an entertainment platform, which is very different from a community-driven platform. And so for our creators, it's so important that they have LTK as their platform agnostic home base. I, as a creator, I'm out there every day meeting my, community and future community on all of these different platforms. It's a way to kind of market them, to tease them to come back home. But you know what? If followers don't matter, you're hearing it directly from the horse's mouth. This is not a place where you can depend on reaching your community. And that's why it's so important that you're bringing them to a safe place that's engineered for your success.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about something that our creators are always asking us about, and that is reach. They've noticed on this platform that their reach is down and they depend on that reach in a lot of ways. So, what are your thoughts on what creators should be doing with their time on Instagram?
So this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say that this is no longer a community-driven platform. Just because you have a certain number of followers, they are telling you outright, your followers do not matter. And so each piece of content has its own opportunity to reach an audience that may or may not be people who have actually opted in to follow you. It could be somebody else. So I think step one is really being intellectually honest about the opportunity that these entertainment platforms offer to us as creators. You have to be completely emotional and think through, what does this tool do and what can I use it for? We know that these platforms are now, I really think of them as like a marketing tool. This is a place to go reach people, but then to bring them back home. It can be a way to get them to your front door. But then I think we all have to ask ourselves, like, what is home? What is it that you have been building for and bringing them home to? If you're a retailer, you know that you're taking them to your retail site. If you are a hospitality property, you're taking them to go book. As a creator, if this is a place to meet a new customer, but it's not a place to reach them every day and talk to them every day, then it's so important that you have that home. And that's why we've built in tools like commenting and shopper profiles and new media formats on LTK, because we want it to be a place where your community feels comfortable showing up every day and you get to continue to tell your story and continue to meet them. We know as creators that really community is what you have, and then trust is how you have it. And so you only trust me if you know me. And I actually find still some of my most engaged followers are people that I even grew up with in elementary school. They know me, they trust me, they know my story. And so as a creator, do not underestimate the need for you to storytell. I often talk about how, like, why is it that Kim Kardashian is still doing reality shows? She has such tremendous success by every measure. And it's because she knows ultimately that people need to still know her story, to care about her, for her to be able to launch a business that's going to be successful. So regardless of how many social media followers she has, how many billions of dollars she has, how many businesses she's launched, she knows that people need to buy in and care about her story. And you need to know that as well. And for you to be able to do that, you have to have a platform that's going to serve your content to them every day.
Absolutely. And you always talk about bringing them home and knowing the importance of bringing them home. You've even told us to write it on a Post-it, which I absolutely love and is a great tip for our creators. But let's switch gears here. I know you spent some time talking to Sarah about TikTok and the impact on the industry overall. What should creators be doing right now to prepare, however things land with TikTok in the future?
Well, whether you're on TikTok or not, every platform is becoming TikTok. They're all looking the same. They all want short form. They're all interest-driven feeds. They are all entertainment platforms. So even if you're not there, this is really a larger question of what's happening in the industry. I think just as a mode of operation, you should never get comfortable, whether you're a creator, a brand, or even a user. The rules are always changing, as are the players. I've never seen a more dynamic industry where day-to-day things are different. So change is really one of the only things that is kind of promised in this industry, and you have to be prepared for it. Do not get comfortable. The next thing is just ask yourself, what are you really building? Maybe you started out by building a social media account, but then what do you do after that? And so that what are you building piece becomes really important in answering some of these questions for yourself and then knowing what to do next. The next thing I want to share is just some of the most successful entrepreneurs that I know personally, that you guys know, that are kind of heroes in the entrepreneurial space. One of their biggest superpowers is high empathy. And so as a creator, that's going to be one of your best tools. What does your follower want? What do they want from you? What does your community want from you? And I would say that there's three things that are just like at a philosophical level true. People want to be seen and acknowledged. They want to be invested in, and they want to be provided kind of access or knowledge or information or value. And so those three things are true of just like humankind. So what does that mean that you need to do? Well, I think first of all, for your followers, your community, it's saying to them, like, I see you. I am so grateful that you're here. It's being kind to them. That's the kind of be seen, the be acknowledged. The next thing about that, like they want to be invested in, is coach your audience that you actually have invested in them. You created a home for them. And then tell them every single chance that you get. Remember, Content is now not going to your community. Content is like popcorn. Like they may or may not see it. You never know who's going to see it. So you have to reinforce it in video every single time that you get a chance to talk to them as like, and by the way, I'm Amber Vin's Box. And if you loved my outfit today, or you want to see Western wear, or you want a XYZ thing, whatever you're showing, be sure you come back to my LTK because there's 3,000 pieces of original content I've made for you just like that. You insert that like a commercial in every piece of content to let them know, hey, I actually do a ton of work. I do it somewhere else, and I want you to come be a part of that. And then that third thing about providing access, knowledge, value, that usually comes through video, and it's helping them to build trust, and it's making sure that the things that you create provide value to their life. And then the last thing that I want to just kind of mention here is, as we talk about platforms going away or changing, the rules changing, it can be really stressful. But I want to remind everyone listening here, you're not a victim. You have an incredible amount of opportunity. Trust is your differentiator. Community is how you have that trust. People want you as their digital friend. Brands want to invest in people that communities trust. There are more dollars going into this industry. I think it's, is it Citi or Goldman that says over the next 3 years, they expect this industry to double. You are sitting in the right place. It's just worth your time to take a step back, sit for a minute, get a whiteboard, get a sticky note, think through, how am I going to acknowledge my audience? How do I show them that I'm investing in them? And then where am I going to be providing value to them?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head with saying that change is really the only constant that creators can expect. So having that home base is really key. I want to dig a little bit deeper and send a message to creators, those who are really waiting it out to see what happens. Maybe they don't believe that there's any risk here, or they're just kind of sitting back and watching. What do you recommend for creators like that, or what do you have to say to them?
Well, I mean, I've never seen anyone have tremendous success without working really hard. You could call it hustle, you could call it hard work, dedication. If you're going to be successful, you actually don't have time to sit back and not think about it, unfortunately. As a business owner, you've got to be thinking through what's going to be happening in the future so that you prepared for that day. Baxter sometimes calls it two-step thinking. You've got to be thinking ahead and not just what's going to happen for tomorrow, but making long-term decisions. Also, just, with any marketing team, the health of your marketing team depends on your diversification, right? And that's the same in any business. You don't want, for example, all your traffic coming from a single source. You don't want all your revenue coming from, as a creator, you don't want one retailer being the only one who's buying collaborations from you, right? So diversification is important. But this is, if you're thinking of sitting back and letting it ride, you're going to do just that, and it'll eventually ride into the ground, and you can ride it out, but you don't have that opportunity if you're serious about staying in this industry. You can listen to More to Say on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday, and I'd love to hear from you. Share your comments and questions in the reviews section, or you can reach me at Amber Vin's Box on LTK, Instagram, or LinkedIn.